Good afternoon, everyone. You guys have been such an amazing crowd all day. I've been watching online from my shanty town in Chihuahua. It's been amazing. Thanks, Caleb. Thanks, Olivia. Those were amazing presenters. My name is Alex Taremwa. I work at the Aga Khan University, Gorgeous School of Media and Communications, but I'm here in my other shoes as the co-founder of the Last Drop Africa. I do it with my friend Edward Nimsima out here on his iPhone doing iPhone people things. I'm here to speak to you about SDG 13, the opportunities and failures, if you will, of our media coverage of the same SDG. We're in 2021, 9 years short of the end of the global goals. And if you ask me where Uganda is in coverage of that particular goal, I would say not far. We still have quite a bit to go, as I will deeply elucidate in my presentation. So the Last Drop is a media non-profit. It's recently founded, so you won't find it anywhere on Google or on socials. This is our official first engagement, and I hope you can bear with us. So I saw my, yes. Do I get one of those sliding things? Perfect. All right, so a brief history of this particular goal. I was born on June 16th, 1991, 19 years after the first UN scientific conference sat in Stockholm to discuss the US Senate and explained what would later become the actual agenda of climate change that we have now. Until then, in 1988, no one had known what climate change or global warming was about. And that year was to be the beginning of the hottest ever recorded year in history, 1988. That was around June. Since then, climate change has been on the agenda, both media, politicians, and these conferences like the one happened last week at the COP26. But before that, in the same year, 1972, the Apollo 17, a spaceship of the American National Space Organization, took that picture from space. It's the first colored picture of planet Earth from above. You can see Africa somewhere if you look around. They called it the blue marble against an expanse of Earth. If you look at this picture now, I'll show you at the end of my presentation, you'll have reason to worry. So Hansen, I was telling you about him, he made a very important point. He said by the year 2000, there will be visible signs on planet Earth that show that greenhouse emissions are a key factor in causing global warming. But of course, you know, our politicians, no one believed him. They went ahead and published a paper with 6 scientists at NASA and clearly explained all those protocols that he was explaining, and also recommendations that he was putting in place, including reduction of CO2 emissions. But we are here maybe 30 years later. I'm 30 years now, and there's still not much has happened. This picture was taken by NASA as well, over Africa, showing you between 2006 and 2007, the kind of heat waves that were going through Africa back then. I am from Ankole, in Kazo district, north of the Great Ankole Kingdom. We are in what they call the Ankole Masaka Cattle Corridor. But before it became a cattle corridor, our forefathers were grazing their cows in peace in that neighborhood. But now, around 1991, where I was born, they were beginning to migrate to a municipality of Uganda called Bulemezi, where Nakasongola is. If you go, you see those long-horned Ankole cows. And that's how it began dawning to me that this phenomenon called climate change was actually an actual thing. And since then, I have interested myself in learning and appreciating what this is about, and have been doing some, stories of my own over time. Like that one. I did that. That was my first ever published story. It wasn't a story, it's a letter. I didn't even know it was published in the Daily Monitor in 2012. But one of my friends, Dr. Brian Semuju, when he was doing his PhD thesis, he did a climate paper, and he was doing content analysis, and he sent me that screenshot. that's how I knew that even before now, I was really heavily invested in climate change. So before 2016, when Uganda ratified the Paris Agreement, we didn't have a particular law that governed how countries in our end of the world would conduct themselves in climate change, climate action, and sustainability. But we ratified all these protocols, the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, but up until now, Parliament just passed in April this year, the first ever law in Uganda that is going to sort of govern how climate change works. The law hasn't been signed by the president, by the way. The law is supposed to create for funding of projects of young people like us who have ideas that can mitigate the effects of climate change. It's supposed to give us some sort of governance structure and give government a mandate to, first of all, call upon their people to govern themselves in as far as implementing these laws are concerned. I grew up, like talking about bush burning in 2012, I was seeing it and I'm still seeing it now, and no one is literally doing anything about it. Uganda is listed number 12 on the countries that will be hit hard by climate change worldwide, not even to mention that we produce less than 3% of the global CO2 emissions. And there's a clear shift in rainfall. Back then we'd have 2 seasons a year. Now we are lucky to have 1 season of rainfall, and if we have it, if you live in Kampala, you see what the effects it has. Floods, displacement. Last year, about 25,000 homes in Kasese were displaced when 5 rivers broke their banks because the glaciers on Mount Rwenzori are disappearing at almost threefold. They were at 7.5 kilometers in 1905, and now they're less than 1 kilometer. And for some strange reason, most of us are comfortable in our houses, we sleep, we wake up, eat breakfast, and go up our business, as if nothing has happened. So the media in this country is by and large failing us, or we are failing them. To begin with, this chart is a sort of metric to measure how many stories come out of Africa, or even the world, in as far as climate change stories are concerned. Globally, we're not even ranked. This ranks 15 newspapers in Africa, and none of them are from Uganda. This is just Daily Nation in Kenya and the New Times in Rwanda, and none of those. They ranked 25,000 stories, but then the sample was about 206 from 15 of them. And out of those, the earliest story to ever come in a newspaper was on page 7 of a newspaper, on page 7, on climate change, mind you, a very global phenomenon, but it is tucked away on page 7 at the earliest. This other graph on the below shows an earlier report done in Uganda by the African Center for Media Excellence. They did a survey on how media covers public affairs, public interest affairs. And as you can see, climate change is somewhere tucked at the bottom on less than 4%, environment and natural resources, far behind politics, business, people power, and foreign affairs, as if there's anyone who loses a kidney when any of those happen. But if someone doesn't eat for a day because their plants couldn't grow or their produce couldn't match up, it's a serious problem. So here are the opportunities for us, especially for us journalists in the room. Climate change is by far the only phenomenon in the world whose problem and solution we know. It's not like we have to look for. We know the cause of climate change and we know what we have to do to solve it. Unfortunately, there's nothing happening to solve that. Media attention, for those of you journalists in the room, has to shift from the politics and the people that be, because they don't really care, to the people in the villages, the ones who are suffering most out of these climate change, changes. They can't grow food. The poverty in rural areas is going through the roof. And the dangers from food wastage, because they throw away food quite a bit, is causing almost 80% of the emissions in the world. Even in America, food wastage causes more emissions than the airlines combined. But there are young people in the room who have solutions to most of these problems. And we, the media, can help those young people to bring those solutions afore if we give them space in the platforms that we run, in the newspapers, on televisions, on social media platforms. Unfortunately, we're not doing that either. We are giving the same spaces, the same politicians telling us about the same grand plans they had between 2016 when the Paris Agreement was ratified until now, and yet we can see for a fact that there's clearly no difference between then and now. Actually, the billionaire businessmen, as you can see right now, are having space fights. Everyone is looking for a plot on Mars, on somewhere. But what's going to happen for you, a one Taremwa and me, who cannot even afford to fly in a plane? When will you get the money to get on a spaceship to go to Mars? If the planet that they are spoiling for us, we are doing nothing to solve. So what can we do about it? The first thing, of course, is to accept that these guys don't have our best interest at heart, and we have to do this work ourselves. So we have to get started. If you drink water, where are you going to throw that bottle? We've been wearing the masks for 2 years now. Do you remember where you put your first mask? I highly doubt. We all wear condoms, I'm sure, to avoid ABC diseases. Can you tell me for a fact where you put that last condom? And do you know where it went? It starts with you, because if that condom, that mask ends up in a drainage channel somewhere in Nachivubo, you can't complain if you find floods in the middle of Kampala. You are part of the problem. Thank you. Secondly, is partnerships and collaborations, like the one we have here. This conference is brought to us by several other players, and I'm sure we can get quite a number who are interested in this particular SDG to bring it to fruition. We have 8 years to doing that, and I can tell you the amount of forest cover Uganda has lost is close to 60% since 1986. The amount of wetlands we have lost to industrialization, rice, sand mining, we can't catch up. Yet the government of Uganda is saying that the only way we can do that is by restoring these. Do you see an actual plan from your government to restore wetlands and forests? When was the last time you planted a tree? When was the last time you cooked with charcoal, though? Not very far from now. When was the last time you burnt fuel? When was the last time you used solar? Some of these things are things that we can do. And also to appreciate that without climate change, we can't have zero hunger. We can't have good health when we're breathing not clean air. We can't have clean water when the desertification you can see between the Sahara and us. Look at the only space with green in Africa. That's the belt that we're in. Not even the Horn of Africa, and not even the South. And it's predicted by the end of our decade, this is going to have gone by a massive 25%. Now, where are we going to live? That's the question for me and for you. So if you're telling your stories, think about the next generation. And if you're drinking your water and using your mask, when you're depositing it off today, think about them as well. Thank you so much.
Are there any questions? You guys are like super attentive and picking everything. Are you sure? Are you scared? Don't be scared. Yeah. All right, let's give Alex one more round of applause. Thank you so much for your time. I, for one, am quite